Yes, subscribe. You always dey watch we program them, but you not subscribe it to the channel. All wetin you get for do, press this red subscribe button, and then you come over here and press this bell. So the bell option, press this one with all. And done. And no get for cost you anything. When you do this, na sign for show say you dey support we for make we do more. Thank you for we do help we for share this program. Yeah, God bless you.
Your Excellency, at this point, it's now my privilege to invite the Attorney General and Minister of Justice for a welcome address and declaration of purpose.
Your Excellency, the President of this Republic, retired Brigadier Dr. Julius Madabio, Honorable Vice President, Mr. Speaker of Parliament, the Honorable Chief Justice, members of the Diplomatic Corps, distinguished ladies and gentlemen, I salute you this afternoon. Your Excellency, the President of the Republic of Sierra Leone, Brigadier Retired Dr. Julius Madabio, I am extremely delighted that we are here yet again to deliver on one key assignment you tasked the Office of the Attorney General and Minister of Justice with following your successful election in 2018 to, in quotes, examine the recommendations of the Constitutional Review Commission and the accompanying white paper in order to give effect to them where practicable. 3 years down the line, we join you here to launch the Constitutional Review White Paper. Congratulations, sir. Your Excellency, the review of the 1991 Constitution has for some years now been part of our advocacy work. This effort further manifested itself when Article 10 of the 1999 Leone Peace Accord made it a national commitment, and the Truth and Reconciliation Commission report further made recommendations for the review of the 1991 Constitution. Upon your instruction, Your Excellency, we immediately set up a technical committee that was mandated to review the 2017 recommendations of the Justice Cowan-led Constitutional Review Committee and the white paper thereof, and to advise Cabinet on recommendations to be implemented as the case may be. I am therefore pleased, Your Excellency, that the technical committee completed the review and submitted its findings to government. Consequently, the outcome of this review process now forms the basis of this white paper. Let me end by thanking your leadership for keeping to your promise of widening the democratic space, and to all members of the technical committee for working selflessly so that collectively we have been able to achieve this huge feat. Thank you for listening, and may God bless us all. Thank you.
Thank you very much, the learned Attorney General and Minister of Justice. Your Excellency, the President, the Honorable Vice President, will now invite for statement, and we'll start with a representative of society organizations, Emmanuel Safa Abola Esquire, who is Executive Director, Society for Democratic Initiatives.
His Excellency the President, the Honorable Vice President, Right Honorable Speaker of Parliament, my Lord the Chief Justice, honorable members of Parliament, ministers present, members of the diplomatic corps, colleagues, civil society, members of the media, distinguished ladies and gentlemen, I greet you all in the name of civil society unionism. Today marks an important democratic milestone for Sierra Leone. My colleagues in civil society have asked me to deliver a statement on their behalf. My brief remark will focus largely on the invaluable role civil society has played and continue to play in the constitutional review process. Many people have described a constitution as a sacred set of laws by which a country should be governed. I agree, but I wish to add that a constitution is not only sacred, it is also the foundation of a democratic society. As we all know, no matter how beautiful a building is, if the foundation is weak, it is a matter of time that it will collapse. That is why, throughout this process, civil society actors have reminded the government and people of Sierra Leone about the need to eschew partisanship and personal interest and focus on what is good for the country. We make laws not to promote or protect the interests of few people, but the larger, wider society. Let us keep in mind that when we make laws to protect the interests of a few people, those laws may very well be used against them in the future. That is why civil society have never missed an opportunity to urge successive governments to expedite the review of the 1991 Constitution in order to complete the country's democratic transition, sometimes to the annoyance of many in government. On behalf of civil society organizations in Sierra Leone, I wish to congratulate the government and people of Sierra Leone for having come this far. While the job is not yet complete, it is undoubtedly an important milestone in the review process. Mr. President, it has been 30 years since the 1991 Constitution was enacted. There is now a wide consensus for it to be reviewed to bring that Constitution in line with significant changes that have taken place in both domestic and international level. Mr. President, civil society appreciates your government's acknowledgement of their contribution in the process. Indeed, we have contributed a lot by making submissions to the CRC, that is the Constitutional Review Committee, supporting the consultation process, and keeping citizens informed and engaged, and most importantly, providing the platform for and amplifying the voices of otherwise the voiceless citizens. We do so because genuine transformation begins with good constitution that reflects the values, hopes, and views of the people. It is the broader rule of law framework for a compatible subordinate legislation that will emerge. The white paper is an important step forward in this process. But like I said earlier, we are a long way from ending this process. We urge the government to remain committed to the process by ensuring public education and consultation on the content of the white paper. And I want to pledge that civil society stands ready to work cooperatively with the government and development partners to popularize the white paper in order to enhance public understanding and ownership. We sincerely hope that the state will act in an expeditious manner to ensure this process is concluded. We further envisage that the next step in this process should avoid a rigid approach and embrace flexibility in order to take on board views that could keep and enrich the final document. There is a need for public education and consultation going forward, especially in respect of additional provisions or clauses that were not part of the original Justice Cowan recommendation. Mr. President, civil society wants a progressive constitution for our country, which we believe your government is on the right track to provide. That is why we will continue to participate in this process to ensure that the outcome of the process reflects the real spirit of constitutionalism, entrenched separation of powers, prioritizing the rule of law, above the rule by individuals, reinforcing supremacy of the Constitution and the sovereign power of the people. It should also provide for an inclusive political processes and outcomes. Mr. President, let me end by saying that civil society looks forward to a white paper that will usher in a progressive, robust, and democratic constitution that takes into consideration issues of women's rights, strengthening state institutions, ensuring the independence of the judiciary is further enhanced, creating an equal platform for everyone by not excluding and creating stateless people by a very archaic constitutional provision that still discriminates against people with color. There are many more things that we may need in this constitution, but on this occasion, there is only one word that I would want to use, Mr. President: progressive national constitution. On behalf of civil society, I want to thank everyone and thank Sierra Leoneans for coming this far. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Emmanuel Safa Abdullah Esquire, for that statement. Your Excellency, the Vice President, to move with some statements, and I also now have the pleasure to invite the representative of the donor partners, Dr. Babatunde A. Awusi, the UN Resident Coordinator, for his statement.
Your Excellency, Brigadier Retired Julius Madabio, President of the Republic of Sierra Leone, Honorable Vice President, Dr. Jude Jallo, Honorable Speaker, Dr. Abbas Bundu, Honorable Chief Justice, Honorable Members of Parliament, Honorable Ministers and representatives of state institutions, Excellencies, members of the Consular Corps, United Nations colleagues, distinguished representatives of civil society organizations, distinguished ladies and gentlemen. Let me extend thanks for this invitation to make remarks on behalf of international development partners at the launch of the government white paper on the constitutional review process. This occasion is an important event for the future of the country and its democratic consolidation, peace building, and state building processes. So we would like to commend His Excellency, the President, Brigadier Retired Julius Madabio, for launching the government's white paper, which represents the conclusion of the initial phase of the constitutional review process and an opening of a new stage of the process. Today's launch is a fulfillment of the pledge made by Sierra Leone during the Universal Periodic Review on Human Rights in May 2021 that the country would finalize the constitutional review process. The constitutional review was first agreed at the 1999 Lome Peace Accord between our stakeholders, and subsequently in 2002, the Truth and Reconciliation Commission recommended the revision of the Constitution through a wide and thorough consultative and participatory process that must lay the foundations for a democratic and open society in which every citizen is equally protected by the law. In 2007, Sierra Leone People's Party government initiated the first constitutional review process and created a commission led by Dr. Peter Tucker. The process ended in 2008 with the submission of the final report to late President Ahmad Sejan Cowan. The constitutional review process restarted in 2013 under the former president, who established an 80-member committee led by late Justice Edmond Cowan to review both the 1991 Constitution and Dr. Peter Tucker's report. The review committee operated from 2013 to 2017 with the technical and financial support of the United Nations Development Programme, the UN Women, the United Kingdom, the European Union, the Ministries of Foreign Affairs of Kenya and Ghana. The support of our development partners was instrumental to ensure a wide consultative process that collected opinions and views of all categories of citizens. During its mandates, the CRC carried out a series of inclusive civic education activities, stakeholders consultations, consultative dialogues, workshops, and expert committees. And just to give an example of how truly consultative it was, we witnessed 10,000 public consultations with various stakeholders nationwide, 80 expert engagements, 198 MDAs were consulted, 150 position papers, 20,000 hours of airtime over the Sierra Leone Broadcasting Corporation and other radio stations for sensitization programs that included live debates, theme songs, jingles, sports messages, and so on. Over 70,000 forms for individuals and institutions were distributed. And as my colleague said earlier, civil society organizations' engagement in the review process was remarkable. All the thematic issues of the 1991 Constitution relating to the executive, legislative, judiciary, issues of information and communication, fundamental principles of state policy and human rights, citizenship, local government, and natural resources were thoroughly debated upon. The report that resulted from this remarkably inclusive effort was delivered by late Justice Cowan to former President Nkrumah on the 24th of January 2017. We know that the government paper was subsequently released in November 2017, which rejected about 100 of the recommendations of that report out of 134. The launch of the white paper today opens a new phase of the review process, as a debate will have to take place in Parliament, a new constitution will have to be drafted, and laws of the country will have to be reviewed accordingly. Some of the provisions might also require a referendum. The drafting of the new constitution will have to take into account the international treaties and conventions signed and ratified by the country. Citizens will have to be educated along the process. So it is our hope that the white paper being launched today reflects the contributions, the aspirations, and the determination of the people of Sierra Leone to improve and sustain the rule of law, lasting peace, and human development. But we must also commend the positive steps already taken by His Excellency the President and his government in advancing several reforms and laws that are part of the recommendations of the constitutional review process, such as the reforms in the media sector, chiefly the repeal of the provisions of the criminal libel law, which had frequently infringed on the right to freedom of speech, the abolition of death penalty, an amendment of the legislation, the land reforms, the ongoing decentralization process, the free quality education program, and the rights of pregnant girls to education, the citizenship reform, the amendment of the Anti-Corruption Commission Act, among others. Other reforms related to the recommendations of the constitutional review process are at an advanced stage of discussion with the participation of relevant stakeholders, such as the Gender Empowerment Bill, the new Political Parties Legislation Commission Act, some electoral reforms, including the fixed date for the general elections, among others. The constitutional amendments proposed during the review process are also relevant for the realization of the Sustainable Development Goals. The current SDG Decade of Action prioritizes solutions that catalyze simultaneous progress on multiple SDGs, including social and economic development and poverty reduction, that is SDGs 1 to 4 and 7 to 11, gender equality and women's empowerment, SDG 5, reducing inequality, SDG 10, environmental protection, SDG 6, 12 to 15, and fostering peaceful, just, and inclusive societies, SDG 16. Your Excellency, Mr. President, key in the constitutional review process following your launching of the white paper today is to create transparency around the process and engage constructively with all relevant stakeholders, including political parties, in order to build the necessary momentum and consensus around constitutional reforms. The constitutional review process is a great opportunity for Sierra Leone to strengthen human rights protection and to make real substantive progress on electoral reforms. Building on today's historic event with a broad and meaningful process of consultation would help to foster inclusive political dialogue, trust building, and fruitful political engagement. The drafting of the new constitution would be a major endeavor. Therefore, the UN system here in Sierra Leone, in collaboration with other development partners, stands ready to support with requisite capacities in ensuring that the process is broadly consultative and fruitful while leaving no one behind. I thank you and I wish Sierra Leone all-round success in 2022. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Babatunde Aonsi, for that inspiring statement and endorsement for the progress His Excellency has made on the reforms in Sierra Leone. At this point, I also now invite the President of Sierra Leone Bar Association, Michael Edenia Swallow, for a statement.
Your Excellency the President, the Honorable Vice President, permit me to stand on existing protocols. The Sierra Leone Bar Association is delighted to be part of this historic ceremony because as lawyers, we believe that the Constitution must be a sacred document in any democracy. On Friday, 10th December 2021, at the annual dinner and awards night organized by the Sierra Leone Bar Association, we were honored for His Excellency and his wife, the First Lady, to grace our event. In my presidential address at the dinner, I stated, and I quote, "Let me also use this opportunity to state that the Sierra Leone Bar Association is concerned about the constitutional review process, and we hope that as a reformer, you will usher us a progressive constitution." Your Excellency, 34 days after that event, we're here this afternoon for the launch of the white paper on the process. Distinguished guests, the constitutional review process can be traced as far back as 1999, Leone Peace Accord, which did not only provide for a review of the Constitution to address the causes of the war, but also to reflect on the aspirations of the people. In 2004, the experience of the Constitutional Review was supported by the report of the Truth and Reconciliation Commission, as it identified the lack of wide public consultation and participation in the drafting process of the 1991 Constitution as a stigma on our democracy. Whether it was the Constitutional Review Commission established in 2006 under the late President Ahmed Tijan Kaba, or the Constitutional Review Committee established in 2013 under the former President Ernest Bai Koroma, today must be the beginning of translating our collective desires for a progressive constitution into reality. Your Excellency, today, we at the Sierra Leone Bar Association argue that the foundation of our democracy must be built on a modern constitution which enhances democratic accountability, promotes socio-economic justice, guarantees human rights, fosters national cohesion, advances gender equality and women empowerment, reduces the over-centralization of powers in the executive, protects the environment and natural resources, and strengthens good governance. At the bar, we also recognize that around the world, governments are often reluctant to embark on reviewing the constitution under which they got power. But Your Excellency, in Sierra Leone, we are optimistic that if you can muster the courage and bravery to repeal the 55-year-old seditious libel law, abolish the death penalty, and introduce the gender empowerment bill, to name a few, and all the positive reforms that you have embarked on, as noted earlier, this long-awaited white paper will signal the dawn of a new constitution. Distinguished guests, this constitutional review process aligns with one of our core functions as a bar association, to promote and support constitutional and legal reforms. I want to publicly commend Honorable Justice Glenna Thompson, JSC, and Ibrahim Sori, ES Esquire, who were the two representatives of the Sierra Leone Bar Association in the 80-member Constitutional Review Committee under the chairmanship of the late Honorable Justice Edmond Cowan. As a Bar Association, we are satisfied that the Constitutional Review Committee promoted the 4 core principles in the design and implementation of the Constitutional Review. First, the principle of inclusiveness, that Sierra Leoneans, whether as individuals, communities, or interests, had an opportunity to participate in the Constitutional Review and express their views. Second, the principle of public participation, that Constitutional Review Committee went to the people through education and consultation so that the review process was nationally owned. Third, the principle of transparency, that the Constitutional Review was open so that the people knew what was happening and were informed at each stage of the process. Fourth, the principle of national ownership, that the people owned the Constitutional Review process, and invariably, they now want to own their constitution. Your Excellency, as you launch this white paper today, no doubt the contents will generate a national conversation or debate among and between citizens. I encourage all of us as citizens to elevate the national conversation and debate above party politics, ethnic and regional sentiments, and personal prejudice. As citizens, this white paper gives us an opportunity to have a common purpose, which is to have a new constitution which is of the people, by the people, and for the people. Let me also assure you, sir, that the Sierra Leone Bar Association stands ready, willing, and able to continue in supporting this process of constitutional reform, because it's not only good for our democracy, but also it is good for promoting the rule of law. Accordingly, we will examine the white paper to ensure it represents the collective ambition of the people of Sierra Leone. Therefore, let me end by expressing our sincere hope as members of the bar that this white paper will be reflective of the aspirations of the people of Sierra Leone for a new constitution. I thank you all.
Thank you very much, the President of the Sierra Leone Bar Association. Your Excellency, the Honorable Vice President, I also now have the singular pleasure to invite the Honorable Chief Justice, Honorable Justice Desmond Edwards, for a statement. The Honorable Chief Justice.
Mr. Chairman,
Your Excellency, the President of this great Republic of Sierra Leone, His Excellency, the Vice President, Honorable Speaker of Parliament, my Lords, Mr. Chief Minister, Attorney General and Minister of Justice, Ministers, Honorable Members of Parliament, members of the Diplomatic Corps, all protocols observed, I feel gratified to have been invited to attend and make a short statement at this auspicious occasion of the launch of the government's white paper on the constitutional review process by His Excellency the President, retired Brigadier Dr. Julius Madabio. Stroll down memory lane. A stroll down memory lane shows that Sierra Leone went through 11 years of gruesome rebel war from 1991, only ending on the 18th of January 2002. Before its end, the Truth and Reconciliation Commission, TRC, had been established as part of the Leone Peace Accord signed on the 7th of July 1999 as part of the broader transitional mechanism to restore peace and stability to a once ravaged war country. With particular specificity, the TRC operated from 2002 to 2004, and it came up with several recommendations touching and concerning constitutional review, noting that, quote, a Sierra Leone that is unified around clear constitutional rights, values, and principles has a promising future, unquote. This led the then current president, Dr. Ahmad Chijan Kaba, to set up the Dr. Peter Tucker Constitutional Review Commission in 2006 with a general mandate to review the Constitution of Sierra Leone Act No. 6 of 1991. This commission met and was able to complete its work in 2008 with a report to the immediate erstwhile President of Sierra Leone, Dr. Ernest Bai Koroma. As the erstwhile President expressed skepticism on the process by his believed lack of wide consultation, his administration was quick to initiate another review process of the 1991 Constitution of Sierra Leone in 2013, with no less than 80 members and or participants drawn from all walks of life, including civil society groups, non-governmental organizations, the Sierra Leone Bar Association, human rights groups, disability groups, women's groups, youth groups, governance institutions, political parties, paramount chiefs, religious bodies, etc., with its chairman being no less a person than the late Honorable Justice Edmond Cowan of blessed memory. This commission received support for this process from UNDP, UK Aid, the European Union, the government of Sierra Leone, among the two others that the UN representative had mentioned. Following nationwide consultations and submissions received in the form of position papers from individuals and interest groups throughout its sojourn throughout the length and breadth of this country, a final report and recommendation of the Justice Edmond Cowan Constitutional Review Committee was presented to our erstwhile President, Dr. Ernest Bai Koroma, on the 24th of January 2017, who thereafter and before his departure from office prepared a government white paper that was released but was never launched or published. The current government of His Excellency retired Brigadier Dr. Julius Madabio, being seized of these documents, saw the need and did set up a technical committee for reviewing both the recommendations of the Justice Cowan Constitutional Review Committee and the unpublished white paper. The technical committee set up by the President has now reviewed both documents, to which the recommendations of the Justice Cowan Constitutional Review Committee, together with the unpublished white paper of the erstwhile government, and what we are witnessing here today is the recommendation of the technical committee, which Cabinet has now accepted, reduced into a white paper, which is being launched today. With a commitment to implement provisions that have been accepted, so long as it's not an entrenched provision requiring a referendum, among other things, with a promise to hold the said referendum in the future for the entrenched provisions, if they would require amendment. Observations from the review process. By way of observation on the constitutional review process, it behoves me to note that the constitutional review process, since its inception by the setting up of the Dr. Peter Tucker Constitutional Review Commission, has undergone a checkered history spanning 2 decades. Of particular importance, one notes that it has involved 3 governments, terminating with the current government. It has the support of European Union, UK Aid, and UNDP as vital partners. The recommendations from both the Nkrumah administration in its unpublished white paper, as well as the Justice Cowan Commissioner Review Committee, were both pertinently considered by the technical committee set up by His Excellency retired Brigadier Dr. Julius Maada Bio. There was need for a technical committee, which was an acknowledgement of noting the wishes of the people and the recommendations, but examining them further as to discern whether those wishes, being lawyers and legal practitioners or technocrats, could be plausibly applied without negative consequences. Judiciary's appreciation of the process of review. The judiciary welcomes the process, not just because there are provisions which will benefit the judiciary and make it more effective, but also for the aforementioned reasons stated. Most welcoming, though, is the fact that the process constitutes legal reform of the highest order. Ours is a rapidly changing civilization, and the courts cannot hope to decide today's controversies adequately with the outmoded rules of bygone centuries. Sir David Hughes Parry, Criminal Law Review, page 1, Reflections on the Law Reform. Similarly to diocese jurisprudence, Justice in Adopting to Change, 5th edition, page 305, observed, the laws of the medics and patients were said to be immutable, but unless a system is capable of adapting itself to changing condition, it can only go the way of the laws of the medics and patients, unquote. Adaptability, thus, he concluded, is a sine qua non to the existence of a legal system. Lord Scammon, at his Hamlin lectures, see Scammon English Law, the New Dimension, page 1, epitomized the concept of adaptability by putting the question thus, quote, I shall endeavor to show that there are in the contemporary world challenges, social, political, and economic, which if the system cannot meet them, will destroy it. These challenges are not created by lawyers. They certainly cannot be suppressed by lawyers. They have to be met either by discarding them or by adjusting the legal system, which is to be. Inherent in the constitutional review process is the concept of adaptability, a system of adjusting the legal system to meet with changes in contemporary Sierra Leone. Lord Scammon, again in his Lindsay Memorial Lectures at the University of Leeds, emphasized the social and moral importance of this when he said, quote, contemporary society requires that it be given the opportunity to test its laws by its own criteria. It insists that laws are either to serve the needs of society or be rejected. In other words, our fellows in society require us to understand and then to evaluate the laws that govern them. We demand not only that the tables be brought down from the mountain and the minutes made clear, but that we have the liberty to smash and replace them, unquote. The constitutional review period has been applied consciously and judiciously, and that's the reason for this launching. We applaud the government, the current government, for continuity, thereby bringing to a seeming close to completion of the process. To borrow the words of the president of the dusted, admired, and put back on the shelf, but is rather like a vigorous tree which has its roots in history, but takes on new graft, put on new sprout, and occasionally drops dead, unquote. Perhaps it is clear that if anything should prompt the idea of constitutional review, it is that urged on justice and social evolution. Bankole Thompson, again, quoting Webster, speaking at that same conference on justice, gave a fine explanation of what justice entails. Justice, he says, quote, is the greatest interest of man on earth, unquote. It is also the ligament which holds civilized beings and civilized nations together. Wherever a temple stands, and so long as it is duly honored, there is foundation for social security, general happiness, and improvement and progress of a race, unquote. As a judiciary, our duty will be, as has always been, firstly to interpret the Constitution. In interpreting the Constitution, we employ and engage the statutory constitutional rules of interpretation, to wit, the literal rule, the golden rule, the mischief rule, the new proposed rule, the ejusdem generis rule, and the expressio unis est exclusio ulterior rule. The prerogative to use any of these rules distinctively remains ours, and it is only time and circumstances that will tell which rule we adopt at any given time. Rest assured that whatever we do will be in tandem with the principles of freedom, democracy, and justice. Why am I saying this? I am saying this because there are times when in any given situation, the public would invariably apply the literal rule, which not necessarily is applied in all situations of constitutional interpretation. For instance, where the literal meaning produces the effect of absurdity, it is naturally abandoned, and this is called the golden rule. You make it sound as if the judges never in fact went to law school, when in fact the combined effect of years of experience of any Supreme Court panel may be not less than 100 years. That is 20 years times 5. If nothing, this can only tantamount to pedigree and judicial clout. While our main vision has been to make justice accessible, fair, and expeditious for all Sierra Leoneans, no doubt our mission, which tells of what we do, remains to be to uphold the Constitution of Sierra Leone and the rule of law, adjudicate matters criminal and civil in all. Upholding the Constitution is a constitutional mandate as enshrined in our said Constitution, as gleaned from a judicial oath of office, which states that we will support and uphold the Constitution of Sierra as by law established. In this regard, we propose to uphold the Constitution and the laws of Sierra Leone as the judge's master. Substantively, we may choose to follow jus cogens when it comes to human rights universally acclaimed, and to apply positive judicial activity, among others, and this stems from the independence guaranteed by the Constitution. Judicial activism, according to Black's Law Dictionary, is a philosophy of judicial decision-making where judges allow their personal views about public policy, among other factors, to guide their decision, unquote. It involves judicial review by overturning laws as unconstitutional, overturning judicial precedents which may be producing bad results, and ruling against a preferred interpretation. Not the least surprising, Judicial activism has been criticized as usurping the power of the elected branches of government or appointed agency, damaging the rule of law and democracy. See Justice Antonin Scalia's dissent in Roma and Evans. For the defenders of it say that in many cases it is a legitimate form of judicial review, and that the interpretation of the law must change with changing times. Judicial activism has been applied in some notable cases. For instance, Brown and Board of Education 1954, where the Supreme Court in the US ruled ordering the segregation of public schools, and Roe and Wade 1973, where the Supreme Court of the US ruled in the United States creating the constitutional right to abortion. We are entering a new dawn. All of us must come on board. I thank you.
Thank you very much, my Lord Chief Justice, for such a very thoughtful and educative presentation. I am sure the Attorney General may need your presentation for the library. So at least we'll remember you in years to come. Thank you, my Lord Chief Justice. I now also invite, with singular pleasure, the Honorable Speaker of Parliament, Right Honorable Dr. Abbas Shoyinobundu, for his statement. Another academic.
Your Excellency, the President of the Republic, Honorable Vice President, my Lord Chief Justice and other justices of the Supreme Court of Judicature, Ministers of Government, Honorable Members of Parliament, Excellencies, members of the Diplomatic and Consular Corps, distinguished ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon. I feel honored to be invited to make a statement on the role of Parliament in the constitutional review process during this launch by His Excellency the President of the government white paper on the constitutional review process. And I would like to do so solely from the perspective of Parliament by making 6 cardinal points. First, that Sierra Leone is a constitutional democracy and has been, for the most part, since she recovered her independence and sovereignty from Britain in April 1961. The promotion and maintenance of peace, security, order, and good government in Sierra Leone is a primordial duty of every organ of state, including Parliament, the organ in which solely the power to make laws for the Republic is expressly and emphatically vested. Second, that in the discharge of this primordial duty, Parliament must take cognizance that not all laws it makes are of equal value and quality. Some laws are, by definition, in a higher category than others. This differential passed by Parliament is clearly enshrined in paragraph 15 of section 171 of the Constitution of Sierra Leone, 1991, Act number 6 of 1991. That section reads, and I quote, "This Constitution shall be the supreme law of Sierra Leone, and any other law found to be inconsistent with any provision of this Constitution shall, to the extent of the inconsistency, be void and of no effect. Thus stated, Section 171, subparagraph 15 gives supremacy to the Constitution of 1991 over all other laws, and it is incumbent upon all state organs to give primacy to the Constitution at all times. Third, that in keeping with the doctrine of supremacy of the Constitution, not as much as a word can be altered in the Constitution unless it has received approbation on the second and third readings of the bill, purporting to make the alteration by the votes of not less than 2/3 of the members of Parliament. Furthermore, such a bill must be duly published in at least 2 issues of the Gazette before its first reading in Parliament, and not less than 9 days must elapse between the first publication of the bill in the Gazette and the second publication. This procedural requirement is succinctly and mandatorily stated that where it is proposed to make a new constitution or to alter any provision in the existing 1991 constitution, which is characterized as extraordinary or entrenched, there is an additional, even more stringent procedural requirement that must be satisfied. The bill in which the alteration is proposed will not become law unless after it has been expressly so passed by Parliament, has additionally been approved at a referendum by the people of Sierra Leone. For such a referendum to be valid, the votes cast must not be less than 1/2 of all persons qualified to vote in a parliamentary election, and not less than 2/3 of all the votes validly cast. Fifth, that the bill must not be submitted for presidential assent unless it has been certified by the Speaker of Parliament that all the referendum requirements have been satisfied. And the Speaker's certificate is not only final and conclusive on the matter, but is also giving immunity from judicial scrutiny. And sixth, that the framers of the 1991 Constitution were in no doubt about the centrality of the role of Parliament in the constitutional review process, to the extent that the Constitution condemns as treason any alteration, suspension, or repeal of the Constitution that is made by means other than under the authority of Parliament. Mr. President, ladies and gentlemen, what I have just stated represents the law of the Constitution relating to its alteration. Whether a proposed alteration is doable or not is a separate issue altogether. If, for example, an alteration is proposed to be passed by the present 5th Parliament, then its doability has to be judged relative to the composition of Parliament at the time. Let me now dwell on this briefly. The 5th Parliament of the Second Republic started its life after the parliamentary election in March 2018 with a total composition of 146 members, comprising 68 members representing the APC party, 49 members of the SLPP, 8 members of the C4C, 4 members of the NGC, 3 independents, and 14 honorable paramount chiefs. Today, through the natural effluxion of life alone, Parliament has lost to eternity no fewer than 6 members of Parliament, including an honorable paramount chief, and its current membership has dwindled to 144 members, comprising 58 from the SLPP, 57 from the APC, 8 from the C4C, 3 independents, and 14 paramount chiefs. Now, ladies and gentlemen, any amendment requires a vote of 2/3 majority in Parliament before it can be passed into law. This means at least 96 affirmative votes. With the composition I've just indicated, except for bills for the alteration of mundane, ordinary provisions of the Constitution, in which all the major political parties represented in Parliament have a shared interest, all other bills face a tall order in the present hung Fifth Parliament, and it is well nigh impossible to predict the outcome with any degree of certainty. For example, if there is a government bill to amend the Constitution, even if it is able to attract all 58 votes of the SLPP, all 14 votes of the paramount chiefs, all 8 votes of the C4C, all 4 votes of the NGC, and all 3 of the independent members, it will still require 9 votes from the APC to achieve the necessary 2/3 majority. In these circumstances, I can only express my utmost best wishes to any person desirous of passing a constitutional amendment in this 5th Parliament of the Second Republic, particularly in these most exacting times. So, Mr. President, ladies and gentlemen, allow me to further adumbrate one other salient observation. The framers of the 1991 Constitution were, in my opinion, quite deliberate and calculated when they made extraordinarily stringent conditions for the alteration of the provisions of the Constitution, even to the extent of declaring it an act of treason if any alteration or repeal of the Constitution didn't first obtain the authorization of Parliament. I think they must have been inspired by their own unique experience and knowledge of history to make that kind of prescription. They deemed it to be inimical to the interests of the people of Sierra Leone, to make it easy for anyone to tinker with the sanctity and sacred nature of our Constitution. Strong reasons must be given for any alteration of the Constitution, and it must not only be reasonable, sound, and powerful, but overwhelmingly so, if not absolutely necessary. In other words, it was their way, that is, the framers of our Constitution, of admonishing future generations to make haste slowly in any attempt to introduce alterations to that sacred document. In this regard, ladies and gentlemen, it is instructive to recall the history of previous attempts that have been made to amend the 1991 Constitution since its promulgation in October 1991. The first attempt was in 1993 by a commission set up by the NPRC under the chairmanship of the late Ahmad Kaba. And the second was in 2008 by a committee led by Dr. Peter Talker. Neither attempt came to fruition for want of a referendum. The third attempt was in 2013 by the late Justice Edmond Cowan Commission established by former President Ernest Bai Koroma. It turned out to be the most trumpeted and the most costly, and yet it came to nothing. Because even though the Commission's recommendations found strong resonance with the will of the people, Koroma's government issued a white paper cherry-picking what it was comfortable with while rejecting the rest. Nor did their draft constitutional amendment bill of 2017 find favor with a parliament that was hurriedly summoned on the eve of its dissolution on 6 December 2017. Your Excellency, ladies and gentlemen, from the perspective of Parliament, I would say that challenges faced by our nation today are as alive as they were in 2008 and 2017, and they behoove us all to maintain for now our unflinching fidelity to the 1991 Constitution and allow it to grow and mature to full blossom, except for a few ordinary mundane provisions able to galvanize the common interest for change amongst all the parties represented in the current Fifth Parliament. The rest can wait for more propitious circumstances to prevail. With that, distinguished ladies and gentlemen, I thank you all for your kind attention, and I wish the process of the review well. Thank you.
Thank you very much, the Honorable Speaker of Parliament, for that advice on the next steps on the white paper. Distinguished ladies and gentlemen, we're here today because we have a president who is progressive, an informer, and above all, a man who always delivers on his promise. Therefore, I now graciously ask all of us to rise with a round of applause as I invite the most courageous and the bravest president of our generation on the constitutional and legal reform.
Sit down, please. Honorable Vice President, Honorable Speaker of Parliament, my Lord Chief Justice, my Lords, Ministers of Government, Honorable Members of Parliament, members of the Diplomatic and Consular Corps, fellow citizens, distinguished ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon. When I promised a new direction for our nation I did so after so much thought and reflection on how we could get it right again as a nation. The anger and brutality of the 10-year civil war and the copious Truth and Reconciliation report of 2004 were inflection points for our nation, Sierra Leone. We tested the bitterness of war. We had not seemed to learn the lessons. Rather than shy away from the hard-hitting recommendations of the Truth and Reconciliation Commission report, as my predecessors did, I have actively implemented them because I believe that those governance reforms are in the best interest of this nation. So in just the last 1 year and some months, I've worked with Parliament, the judiciary, development partners, and civil society organizations to implement half a dozen of the key governance and legislative imperatives outlined in the Truth and Reconciliation report. My government has repealed Part 5 of the Public Order Act. There are no journalists imprisoned for the practice of journalism. The Sierra Leone Association of Journalists and international media and free speech organizations have been consistent that free speech and the practice of journalism are indeed unfettered in Sierra Leone. My government has established the Independent Commission for Peace and National Cohesion to identify and resolve potential triggers of conflict in our nation. According to the Global Peace Index, we are the fourth most peaceful country in Africa. To further cement our credentials as a tolerant nation, Sierra Leone will soon be the latest member of the International Religious Freedom of Belief Alliance, a global alliance that promotes universal respect for freedom of religion or belief. My government has permanently abolished the brutal and inhuman death penalty for all crimes. In my New Year's pardon, I commuted all death penalties to life in prison. Never again we will execute our own brothers and sisters in this nation. We have deepened and speeded up the process of decentralization. We have decongested prisons, improved prison conditions, and significantly expanded commitment and success in ruling justly and investing in our people. Today, we will address gaps, discrepancies, and inconsistencies in our 1991 Constitution that the TRC report identifies as triggers of conflict and bad governance. Especially in the decade preceding 2018, we witnessed unconstitutional intrusions on matters of the rule of law and on the protection and promotion of rights and liberties guaranteed in our Constitution. Executive privilege and powers were loosely defined and used. Inclusion and equality were not guaranteed in law, not to mention in practice. There are significant gaps in access to the essential elements of a thriving democracy, access to fundamental resources and opportunities. Matters of citizenship were not clearly defined and were basis for exclusion and discrimination. In the New Direction Manifesto, we bemoaned the countless breaches, infractions, and abuses by President Cowan and his All-People's Congress Party, including the sacking of an elected vice president of our nation. We promised to remedy the weaknesses, shortcomings, and other lacunae that manifested themselves in the course of application of the terms of the Constitution by way of specific amendments of its relevant parts in order to give efficacy to the promotion and protection of good governance and respect for the rule of law at all times. I've always signaled that only bold and audacious decisions can transform our nation. I've always argued that what are critical for consolidating and enriching our democracy are recognizing and embracing the inevitability of progressive change. We promised, we worked diligently. Today, we have delivered. We had the former APC government shilly-shallied. We acted decisively because a review and amendment of the 1991 Constitution, though long overdue, is urgently needed and is in the best interest of the people of this country. So today, we go full circle from the setting up of the Constitutional Review Committee, CRC, by my predecessor, Dr. Ahmed Jankaba. With great reverence, we remember the outstanding leadership of late Justice Edmond Cowan and the 80 other citizens who worked in the CRC reconstituted by President Ernest Bai Koroma. I also thank the technical committee that examined the recommendations of the Constitutional Review Commission and the accompanying white paper with a view to giving effect to them as much as practicable. Your work is done today, but you give your unions a bigger task to understand, speak to one another with honesty about why these reforms matter, and work together to make this nation even better. As I've always said, the ties that bind us together as a nation have always and will always be stronger than the fear-mongering and selfish interests of bad politicians that blind us. The perfect attempt in 2017 to push through a restricted number of recommendations was not in compliance with constitutional procedure and also violated ECOWAS protocol. Our approach is different. We will take practical steps to implement the non-entrenched ones immediately. The entrenched provisions will be addressed within an exclusive and uncluttered timeline, and in all likelihood, after extensive consultations, engagement, public education on those provisions. No entrenched provision will be rushed through a referendum ahead of the forthcoming general and presidential elections. The full white paper, as accepted, is rational and more extensive than the 2017 white paper. For instance, it includes human dignity and equality among fundamental principles of state policy, new sections for greater inclusivity, agrees to change in nomenclature of group of persons in line with international best practices, and places the burden on the states to prohibit discrimination while promoting national integration and unity. It affirms the state's commitment to provide free quality and compulsory education at primary and secondary school levels, and includes civic education and entrepreneurship among states' educational objectives. Government will promote national culture, and especially national fashion, and citizens will have a duty to respect the national currency and national pledge. In other instances, sections of the Constitution will be renamed. For instance, the recommendation to rename Chapter 3 of the 1991 Constitution to read the recognition, promotion, and the recognition, protection, and promotion of human rights and freedom of the individual, in line with international obligations in safeguarding and promoting human rights of its citizenry, is accepted. There are recommendations for reduced detention periods prior to being brought to court. Unlawfully arrested or detained persons shall be entitled to compensation or public apology. Government also accepts the recommendation to protect fundamental rights subject to national security interests. Those rights shall not be derogated from during a state of emergency. Government also accepts that a completely new chapter should be dedicated to clearly defining citizenship and addressing all questions of discrimination and exclusion once and for all. On elections, government accepts the recommendation for fixed and predictable dates for elections and inaugurations. Furthermore, a 50% plus one threshold is proposed in view of the circumstances, insecurity, and expenses associated with runoffs for presidential elections. Loss of party membership shall no longer be sufficient and be the sole cause for removal of the president or vice president from office. A 2/3 parliamentary majority will be needed to ratify any resignation or expulsion notice from a political party. Impeachment processes will also be clearly defined. Government accepts the recommendation to decouple the office of the Attorney General from that of the office of the Minister of Justice. The Attorney General will now be the principal advisor to the government and not a cabinet minister, while the Minister of Justice will continue to sit in cabinet. Questions around age limit are also addressed for judicial and electoral commission appointees accordingly. Government accepts the renaming of the PPRC to the Political Parties Registration and Regulatory Commission in view of its existing mandate. Most importantly, my government has argued for and worked towards achieving increased participation and representation of women in our democracy. In that regard, my government accepts the increased mandatory minimum representation of women in parliament. Furthermore, my government accepts that members of parliament shall be elected in accordance with the system of proportional representation. This, in my government's view, is spare the nation the acrimony, cost, and insecurity associated with by-elections. Also, the period for public officers and members of the armed forces who wish to vie for parliamentary seats to resign from public service shall now be reduced to 6 months. Government also accepts recommendations that a speaker shall be a person who are either members of parliament or are qualified to be elected as such. and qualified to be appointed as judges of the Supreme Court of Judiciary. My government also accepts that parliamentary committees will now additionally have powers to investigate and inquire into the activities or administration of agencies of government. There are changes also in the judiciary. Government accepts that the Chief Justice shall, by statutory instrument, restruct divisions of the Court of Appeal as he or she may consider necessary. Within the judiciary, government also accepts the recommendation specifying age requirements and the composition of the Supreme Court, Court of Appeal, and the High Court. Government accepts the expansion of the Judicial and Legal Services Commission and also accepts the change in reference to courts as inferior and traditional to subordinate and local, respectively, among other changes. There are arguments for the inclusion of new chapters: local government and decentralization, national security, public service, and citizenship. Overall, these are indeed the most extensive and thoroughgoing constitutional reforms we will undertake since we adopted the 1991 Constitution. We will now undertake public education for all recommendations so there is clear understanding and buy-in by all citizens. Ladies and gentlemen, I will close by thanking the technical committee, stakeholders, citizens, our development partners, and everyone who has contributed to making this history. With that being said, I now have the pleasure to launch the government white paper on the constitutional review.
Thank you very much, Your Excellency, for that brave and courageous delivery. As I said, you are going to be the president of our generation on legal reforms. Thank you very much. And a round of applause again for His Excellency the President. May we all rise for the national anthem. Thank you very much, the Silent Police Band.
Yes, subscribe. You always dey watch we program them, but you not subscribe it to the channel. All wetin you get for do, press this red subscribe button, and then you come over here and press this bell. To the bell option, press this one with all. And don't and not get for cost you anything. When you do this, na sign for show say you dey support we for make we do more. Thank you for your help for share this program. Yeah, God bless you.